A 9-year-old girl walked into a job interview. What the CEO discovered broke him. The glass doors of Whitmore Enterprises slid open with a soft whoosh, letting in the clamor of the city for just a moment before sealing it away again. Inside, the air was crisp with the scent of expensive cologne, polished marble, and quiet ambition. Men and women in tailored suits moved briskly, their eyes glued to tablets, voices low and urgent. It was a temple of power, and no one noticed the little girl who had just stepped in. She wore a yellow sundress that had faded from too many washes. Her shoes were scuffed white sneakers one size too small, and her curls were tied back with a ribbon that had once been pink. Her name was Ellie, and she stood barely 4 feet tall, clutching a folded piece of paper in her hand as she approached the reception desk. The receptionist looked up, clearly caught off guard. "Sweetie, are you lost?" Ellie shook her head, calm and composed. "No, ma'am, I'm here for the job interview. My name is Ellie Lawson." The woman blinked, searching for a hidden camera. "The interview?" "Yes. The ad said anyone could apply. I want to speak with Mr. Whitmore." There was a beat of silence so still it was almost sacred. Then came the chuckle from the receptionist, awkward and polite. "Honey, Mr. Whitmore is the CEO. He doesn't do entry-level interviews." "I don't want an entry-level job," Ellie replied, placing the paper on the desk. "I want to be his assistant." It was absurd, ridiculous, impossible, and yet something about the child's gaze, steady, unwavering, far too grown for her age, made the receptionist hesitate. She reached for the intercom. Upstairs, Daniel Whitmore was pacing behind his desk, Bluetooth headset in his ear, barking orders about quarterly projections and board approvals. His office was a corner sanctuary of glass and steel overlooking Manhattan. He thrived on control, on power, on efficiency. And today he had no time for nonsense. When his assistant's voice crackled through the intercom, "Sir, there's a child here to interview for the assistant position," he nearly laughed. "What?" "She's insistent, sir. Her name is Ellie Lawson." The name struck him with an odd familiarity, like a whisper from a dream he couldn't place. "Send her up," he said before he knew why. Moments later, the elevator dinged and Ellie stepped into his office. She walked with the quiet confidence of someone who had faced much harder doors than this. Daniel stared at her, momentarily speechless. "I know I'm young," she began, standing in front of his desk, "but I have a resume, and I'm very good at organizing, and I learn fast." Daniel took the paper she handed him, glancing down, and froze. There, typed neatly beneath her name and age, was a line that hit him like a sledgehammer. "Looking for my father. His name is Daniel Whitmore." His breath caught. The paper trembled in his hand. Daniel's fingers tightened around the paper as his world tipped on its axis. He read the line again slowly, as if repetition might somehow make it different. The child standing before him, her big brown eyes, her calm composure, her strange certainty, was claiming to be his daughter. It had to be a mistake, a cruel joke. But there was something eerily familiar in the curve of her cheek, the stubborn lift of her chin. He looked up at her, his voice unsteady. "Where did you get this name?" Ellie blinked. "My mom gave it to me. She said my dad worked here. I've been saving for the subway ride for months." He lowered himself slowly into his chair. "What's your mother's name?" "Rachel Lawson." The name hit like a thunderclap. Rachel. It had been over 10 years, but he remembered her. Her wild laughter, her fierce independence, the way she walked away from his penthouse one rainy night and never came back. He had searched for her for months after, until he finally accepted she didn't want to be found. There had been no letters, no calls, nothing. You said you're 9? She nodded. "I'll be 10 in November." Daniel's breath hitched. He did the math. Rachel had left 10 years ago. No goodbye, no explanation. Had she been pregnant? "Why now?" he asked, struggling to keep his voice calm. "Why come here now?" "My mom died," Ellie said softly. "Last month. Car accident. I was in the hospital for a week. Then I went home, but no one came. So I waited. I found her old papers. She had a photo of you. There was an address on the back of it, and I followed it here. Silence engulfed the room. Daniel stared at her, his thoughts spinning, his chest heavy. She wasn't crying. She didn't tremble. She had probably cried all her tears already. All that was left was purpose. I didn't come to ask for money, Ellie continued. I didn't want to go to a foster home. I wanted to meet you, to know who you are. Maybe you don't want me, and that's okay. I just needed to try. The words sliced through him with surgical precision. Something inside Daniel cracked, something that had been tightly locked for a decade. He looked away, toward the skyline, his voice barely audible. I didn't know, Ellie, I swear to you, I didn't know. I believe you, she whispered. You wouldn't have let me go if you knew, right? He turned back to her, the sharp pain of guilt blooming in his chest. No, never. Her eyes searched his face. So, what now? Daniel couldn't speak. He didn't know. His past had just walked into his boardroom wearing sneakers and carrying the truth. And it wasn't going to walk back out. Daniel stood abruptly, needing motion to counter the whirlwind in his chest. He moved to the window, gripping the edge of the sill so tightly his knuckles whitened. The city below bustled on, oblivious to the storm erupting in his office. Behind him, Ellie waited silently, hands clasped in front of her like she was used to waiting, for adults to make decisions, for life to settle, for someone to notice her. He turned slowly, eyes scanning her tiny frame. Do you have anywhere to stay? She shook her head. After the hospital, I went back to our apartment, but it was locked. The landlord said my mum hadn't paid rent in weeks. I stayed with Mrs. Downing, our neighbor, but she said she couldn't keep me. Have you eaten today? Ellie hesitated, then shrugged. A granola bar on the train. Daniel moved to his desk and pressed the intercom. Cassandra, cancel the rest of my day. Have a lunch brought in. Something kid-friendly. Yes, sir. He turned back to Ellie, still trying to reconcile the facts. Rachel had been pregnant. She never told him. Ellie had lived 9 years without him, without support, without safety. And now she was here. This wasn't a board decision or a hostile takeover. This was a child. His child. You'll stay with me for now, he said finally, until we figure this out. Ellie's face remained unreadable, but her shoulders eased slightly. Okay. Lunch arrived. Grilled cheese sandwiches, tomato soup, apple slices. Daniel sat across from her as she ate, fascinated by the small, meticulous way she dipped each bite in the soup before eating. She was quiet, but not shy. Watchful, like someone who had learned to listen more than speak. Ellie, he said gently, do you remember your mum talking about me at all? Not really, just that you were important. She kept one picture. You were smiling, and she had written your name on the back. That's all I had. Daniel felt a lump form in his throat. That photo was from their trip to Lake Placid, one of the few truly happy weekends of his life. He'd thought it might mean something to her, but clearly it had meant everything. I want to help you, he said, not just with a place to sleep. I want to be in your life, if you'll let me. Ellie nodded slowly. I'd like that. It was a fragile bridge being built between them, plank by plank, word by word. And Daniel knew this wasn't going to be easy. She wasn't just a daughter. She was the child of a woman who had walked out without a trace. There were truths still buried, reasons unspoken. He smiled gently. After lunch, we'll go buy you some clothes and whatever else you need. Then we'll go home, my home. Ellie's eyes widened slightly. You have a home. Big one, too big. I think it's been waiting for you. The black SUV pulled into the underground garage of Daniel Whitmore's luxury penthouse tower, its tinted windows reflecting the gleam of polished concrete and chrome. Ellie sat in the back seat, her small hands resting in her lap, holding the handles of a crisp new shopping bag. She'd picked out pajamas, a toothbrush, a sketch pad, and a plush rabbit she'd named Buttons. She hadn't asked for anything more. Daniel had wanted to buy her half the store, but she'd only picked what she needed. As the elevator rose, Daniel studied her in the mirrored walls. Her reflection looked so small next to his. Yet something about her presence filled the space completely. He couldn't stop staring at her eyes. They were Rachel's shape, but his color, steel gray with specks of green. The same eyes he saw every morning in the mirror. When the elevator doors opened into his penthouse, Ellie stepped forward cautiously. The space was cavernous, floor-to-ceiling windows with a skyline view, sleek modern furniture, glass, leather, silence. It was pristine and cold, like a showroom, not a home. Ellie turned to him, a flicker of hesitation crossing her face. "Do I live here now?" "For as long as you want," he said, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "It's yours too." She walked slowly toward the large sectional couch, trailing her fingers along the smooth leather. Then she wandered over to the window, pressing her face against the glass to see the world below. "It's really high," she whispered. Daniel chuckled softly. 32nd floor. "It doesn't feel like a place for kids," he nodded. It wasn't, until now. He gave her the tour, the guest room that would be hers, the kitchen she could raid any time, the library she could explore. Her eyes lit up at the shelves of books, and she lingered there longer than anywhere else. That night, after she'd changed into her new pajamas and curled up in bed with buttons, Daniel sat in the hallway outside her room, listening. She didn't cry. She didn't ask for anything. Just silence. He knew that kind of silence, too heavy for a child to carry alone. Back in his study, he opened his laptop and searched Rachel Lawson, obituary. A few clicks later, there it was. She had died on May 18th. The article was short. Car crash, no other survivors, no mention of family. No funeral details. Daniel leaned back in his chair, memories rushing in like a flood. Rachel laughing barefoot in his kitchen, dancing to Nina Simone, saying she didn't want to be owned by anyone. He had loved her, and she had left without a word. Why? Why hadn't she told him? He opened a locked drawer and pulled out a faded envelope. It was the last thing she had ever sent him, postmarked the week before she disappeared. He had never opened it. His pride had told him not to. Now, with trembling hands, he tore it open. Inside was a single photograph and a letter that began with, "If you're reading this, I've already made the hardest decision of my life. If you're reading this, I've already made the hardest decision of my life, and I don't expect you to understand it right away, but I hope one day maybe you will." Daniel's eyes scanned the letter, each word a ghost from the past rising to haunt him. "When I found out I was pregnant, I was terrified. Not because I didn't love you, but because I knew the kind of world you lived in, suits, meetings, power, control. I didn't want our child to be a line in a schedule. I didn't want her to grow up learning silence instead of laughter. And maybe that was unfair of me. Maybe I should have let you choose, but I chose for both of us. I took her away." His throat tightened. The words blurred as tears formed in his eyes. The paper trembled in his grip. "Her name is Ellie. She's bright, stubborn, kind. She has your eyes, you know. I see them every day. And I've told her stories about you, good ones. I never wanted her to hate you. I wanted her to understand that love is messy, that sometimes people leave not because they don't care, but because they care too much to ruin what they had." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, the letter shaking in his hands. "But if something ever happens to me, and it might, I want you to know. I want Ellie to know where she came from, that she wasn't abandoned, that you were always a part of her, even if you didn't know it. If you get this, and please find her, and if there's any part of you that still remembers us, give her a chance to know you. She deserves that, and so do you. With love." Rachel Daniel sat back, exhaling shakily. The photograph that had been tucked in the letter was of Rachel holding a baby, wrapped in a sunflower-printed blanket. Ellie. He traced the edges of the photo with his thumb, his chest a hurricane of grief, guilt, and longing. He looked up at the ceiling, blinking hard. "You should have told me, Rachel," he whispered. "I would have loved her. I would have fought for her." A soft sound pulled him from his thoughts. He turned to see Ellie standing in the doorway, her hair tousled, buttons dangling from one hand. She looked sleepy, uncertain. "I had a dream about my mom," she said quietly. Daniel rose, the letter still in hand. "Yeah?" She was smiling, holding me. "I think she wanted me to be here." Daniel crossed the room and knelt before her. "She did. She wanted you to be safe, and so do I." Ellie looked at the letter in his hand. "Is that from her?" He nodded. "She wrote it for me. About you." Ellie's eyes softened. "Can I read it?" He hesitated, then gently handed it to her. "When you're ready." She held the paper delicately, as if it might vanish. Then, wordlessly, she hugged him, tight, fierce, a hug that said more than any words could. And for the first time in years, Daniel felt something break open inside him, something like hope. The next morning, sunlight streamed into the penthouse, softening its sharp edges. Ellie sat at the kitchen island, swinging her legs beneath the stool as she ate scrambled eggs and toast. Daniel stood nearby with a cup of coffee, watching her like she might disappear if he blinked too long. She looked at ease in the quiet hum of the morning, her bunny nestled beside her plate like a dinner guest. "I think I want to go to school again," she said suddenly between bites. Daniel raised an eyebrow. "You haven't been going?" "Not since Mom got sick. It was hard. She didn't want people to know." He set his mug down. "All right, we'll find you a school. A good one." She smiled, but there was something distant in her eyes. "Do you think people will know I'm yours?" He paused, unsure how to answer. "Do you want them to?" She shrugged. "I don't know. You're kind of famous." Daniel laughed gently. "Only in boring business magazines. Still, I don't want anyone to think I'm here because I want money or something." His expression softened. "Ellie, you're here because you're my daughter. That's the only thing that matters." She nodded slowly, accepting the words, but he could see the doubt, the shadow of years spent learning not to expect permanence. Later that day, Daniel arranged a meeting with a private school just a few blocks away, St. Evangeline's, one of the city's best. Uniforms, rigorous academics, a nurturing environment. He watched Ellie's eyes widen as they toured the campus. She ran her hand along a row of lockers and peeked into the art studio where students painted under skylights. "I like it here," she whispered as they walked back to the car. "You'll start Monday," he said. "We'll get your books and uniforms tomorrow." She looked up at him. "You don't have to do all this, you know." He stopped walking and crouched beside her. "Yes, I do. I missed the first 9 years of your life, Ellie. I won't miss another minute." Back at the penthouse, Daniel received a call from a private investigator he'd hired to look into Rachel's last years, where she'd lived, who she'd known. He stepped into his study to take the call. "She lived quietly," the investigator said. "No real connections. One friend, Mara Jennings, used to work with her. Might have answers." Daniel thanked him and hung up. His mind raced. There were still pieces missing, things Rachel hadn't said in her letter. Why did she vanish so completely? Why had she suffered in silence? As he stepped back into the living room, he saw Ellie curled up on the couch, reading a book she'd pulled from his library. Her face was peaceful, but a storm brewed quietly inside her too. He knew it. He could feel it. The truth had brought her here, but the past wasn't done with them yet. And as Daniel stood there watching his daughter breathe in this new life, he knew the next answers he found could change everything again. That night, after Ellie had gone to bed, Daniel sat alone in his dimly lit study, fingers drumming against his whiskey glass. The letter still lay open on the desk, the photo beside it. He couldn't stop thinking about Rachel, about how she had vanished into obscurity, raising their daughter in the shadows while he built empires. And now, with the name Mara Jennings, a thread had appeared, one that might finally unravel the silence. He dialed the number the investigator had given him. After a few rings, a woman answered, her voice wary. "Hello? Ms. Jennings? This is Daniel Whitmore." There was a pause. "I was wondering when you'd call." He blinked. "You knew I'd find you?" Rachel always said if something happened to her and you found out about Ellie, you'd come looking for the truth. I guess she was right. He leaned forward, his voice low. I need to know what happened. Why she left. Why she never told me about the baby. Mara sighed. It wasn't about you, Daniel. Not really. Rachel was scared of your world, of what it would do to her, what it would do to Ellie. She grew up poor. She didn't want her daughter swallowed by that machine. She didn't even give me a chance, he muttered. She thought she was protecting you both. Daniel's jaw clenched. She died alone. No, Mara said gently. She died with Ellie in her arms. The silence between them stretched for a moment. She was sick for a while, Mara continued. Didn't tell anyone, not even me, until it was too late. She was working 2 jobs, raising Ellie alone. She refused help, said it was her choice, her responsibility, but I begged her to reach out to you, she wouldn't. Daniel felt his throat tighten. Why not? She was ashamed and proud, and maybe still a little heartbroken. He closed his eyes. I would have helped. I would have taken care of them both. I know, Mara said, and I think deep down Rachel knew too. That's why she wrote that letter. Daniel thanked her, voice hoarse, and ended the call. He stared at the photo again. Rachel, younger, tired but glowing, holding Ellie as if the world would end without her. The next morning, Ellie found him asleep on the couch, the letter still in his lap. She picked it up quietly and read the words again. When he stirred and saw her there, reading the past that had shaped her future, he didn't stop her. Do you think she was scared? Ellie asked softly. Yes, Daniel replied, but she was brave too. She gave everything for you. Ellie nodded. She used to say I was her whole world. Daniel pulled her close, arms wrapping around her small frame. Now you're mine too. But even as he said it, a quiet knock came at the door. He stood, frowning. No one came to his penthouse unannounced. When he opened the door, a woman stood there. Early 30s, professional suit, guarded expression. I'm sorry to disturb you. I'm from Child Protective Services, she said, holding up a badge. We've received a report. I need to speak with you about Eleanor Lawson. Daniel's blood ran cold. He stepped back instinctively, shielding Ellie behind him even though she couldn't see the doorway from where she sat. His heart pounded as he studied the woman's face, calm, neutral, but with a tension in her posture that told him this wasn't a courtesy visit. I'm her father, he said quickly. I have temporary custody. She came to me directly. The woman nodded once, her tone professional. I understand, Mr. Whitmore. We're aware of the situation. We received an anonymous tip. I'm not here to remove her yet, but we need to verify that everything is in order. There are protocols. Daniel's jaw tightened. She's not going anywhere. That's not up to you, she replied calmly. Not entirely. May I come in? He hesitated, then stepped aside, ushering her into the living room where Ellie now sat upright, hugging buttons to her chest. Her eyes darted between Daniel and the stranger. She didn't speak. Ellie, this is Ms. Barnes. She works with the government, Daniel said carefully. She just wants to make sure everything's all right. Ms. Barnes crouched gently in front of Ellie, softening her voice. Hi, Ellie. I'm just here to ask a few questions. Is that okay? Ellie looked at Daniel, uncertain. He gave her a reassuring nod. Slowly, she turned back to the woman. Okay. Do you feel safe here? Barnes asked gently. Ellie nodded. Yes. Has anyone hurt you or scared you since you arrived? She shook her head. No. Mr. Whitmore is kind. Do you know him? Ellie hesitated. He's my dad. Ms. Barnes glanced back at Daniel. Do you have proof of paternity, sir? Daniel swallowed. I've filed for a DNA test. The results should be in by the end of the week, she nodded. Until then, it's considered a custodial grey area, and without a will or guardianship paperwork from her mother, it's more complicated. Daniel's voice turned sharp. You're not taking her. No one said that, she replied evenly. But I will need to conduct a formal home visit, background check, interview, possibly speak with the school when she starts. It's routine, especially in high-profile cases. Ellie looked confused. "Did I do something wrong?" Daniel crouched beside her, placing a hand on her back. "No, sweetheart. You did everything right. They're just making sure you're safe." Ms. Barnes stood. "We'll be in touch. I recommend you consult a family lawyer." After she left, Daniel closed the door with more force than necessary. He turned and found Ellie standing in the hallway, her voice small. "Are they going to take me away?" "No," he said firmly, walking over and kneeling in front of her. "I won't let them." She looked up at him with trembling eyes. "But what if they don't believe us?" Daniel took her hands. "Then we'll make them believe. I'll fight for you, Ellie, no matter what." But even as he said it, a sinking feeling settled in his gut. Someone out there didn't want Ellie to stay. Someone was trying to tear them apart. And Daniel knew he'd have to find out who, and fast, before the past took everything from him a second time. The following morning, Daniel was already on the phone with his legal team before the sun had fully risen over Manhattan. His voice was tense, clipped, but beneath it was a quiet desperation he hadn't known he was capable of. This wasn't just about legal custody. It was about protecting Ellie from a system that saw her as a case file instead of a child who had lost everything. "I want the best family attorney in the city," he told his assistant. "Money is no object. I need full custody, expedited if possible. Today." By noon, he was sitting across from Naomi Lerner, a sharp-eyed woman with a calm demeanor and a reputation for making judges listen. She wore no-nonsense glasses and spoke in direct sentences that landed like courtroom gavel strikes. "I've reviewed the CPS visit report," she said. "They're not hostile, but an anonymous tip complicates things. We'll need to neutralize the perception that Ellie was kidnapped from her environment." "She had no environment," Daniel snapped. "Her mother died. She was alone. I did what any parent would." Naomi didn't flinch. "You did what any moral parent would, but the law sees facts. No custody paperwork, no death certificate linked to a guardianship claim, no DNA results, yet. You need to prepare for the possibility of a hearing." Daniel leaned forward, his voice low. "She's my daughter." "I won't let them take her." Naomi nodded once. "Then let's make it impossible for them to try." Meanwhile, back at the penthouse, Ellie sat on the window seat, watching clouds drift over the skyline. She held Rachel's letter in her lap, tracing her mother's handwriting over and over. She missed her voice, her smell, the way she hummed while making tea. But even as the grief clung to her, something new was blooming. Safety. Daniel returned late that afternoon, visibly tired but smiling. "We've got a great lawyer. She's going to help us." Ellie looked up. "Do I have to go to court?" "Maybe, but you won't be alone. I'll be right there." Ellie nodded. "Okay." That night, while Daniel worked in his study, Ellie wandered into the guest room that had become hers. Something about it still felt temporary, like she was borrowing someone else's life. She opened a drawer in the nightstand and froze. Inside was a small box. Curious, she lifted the lid. Inside were a few old photos, papers, and, tucked beneath a yellowed envelope, a hospital bracelet. Her mother's name was printed on it. So was the date. But the date was strange. It was months earlier than her birthday. Ellie frowned, confusion tightening her chest. Had it been a mistake or something else? She tiptoed into the study, bracelet in hand. "Daniel?" He looked up, smiling, until he saw what she held. "Where did you get that?" "In my room. I found it in a drawer." He slowly stood, his face unreadable. "That was Rachel's," he said, "from the hospital." "But the date's wrong. It's not when I was born." Daniel's heart stopped, because it wasn't a mistake, and it wasn't Ellie's. Daniel stared at the bracelet, the numbers imprinted on the plastic band as clear as a bullet. He hadn't seen it in years, not since Rachel had sent it to him anonymously, months after she'd disappeared. Back then, he'd assumed it was a message. A cruel way of saying goodbye, or maybe proof of something he'd never be allowed to touch. He had tucked it away, unable to face what it might mean. And now, Ellie had found it. "Ellie," he began, his voice rough, "that bracelet, it's not yours." Her brows furrowed. But it has Mom's name. Why would she keep it? He gently guided her to the couch, sitting beside her, bracing himself. Because there was another baby. She blinked, the words not sinking in. What do you mean? Daniel rubbed his temples. Rachel was pregnant once before you, years ago. She lost that baby. Miscarriage, late term. She never talked about it, not really. But that bracelet, it's from that time. I didn't know she kept it. Ellie looked down at it, her voice small. So, I had a sister. Maybe, or a brother. Rachel never told me. Only that it happened and she couldn't bear to speak about it. Ellie nodded slowly, clutching the bracelet to her chest. She never told me either. Silence settled thick between them. Then she whispered, "Did she lose that baby because of you?" Daniel flinched. The question was like a slap, but it wasn't cruel. It was curious, honest. "I don't know," he admitted. "We were fighting a lot back then. I was always working, always absent. Maybe she felt alone. Maybe the stress was too much. I'll never know. But if I had been there, if I had seen the signs, maybe it wouldn't have happened." Ellie leaned against him, her voice quiet. "Do you think she was still sad about it when I was born?" "I think she loved you more because of it," Daniel said. "You were her second chance." Ellie nodded. "Then I'll keep this, for her, and for whoever came first." Daniel hugged her, holding her tight. There was a strange peace in the moment, pain and healing woven together, but just as the silence began to soothe them, Daniel's phone vibrated on the table. He reached for it, glancing at the screen. DNA results available. He opened the message. His eyes scanned the page, and then he stopped breathing. Ellie looked up at him. "What is it?" Daniel looked at her, heart pounding. He didn't know how to say it, because the test said something impossible. Daniel Whitmore, 0% biological relation to Eleanor Lawson. The little girl beside him was not his daughter. Daniel felt the blood drain from his face. The numbers swam before his eyes, the screen slipping slightly in his hand as the truth sank in. No biological relation, none, not even a distant trace. He blinked, reread the report, as if willing the outcome to change with each pass. Ellie saw the shift in his expression. "What's wrong?" He looked at her, her wide eyes, the hopeful tilt of her head, the trust etched into every line of her small face. How could he say it? How could he take that away from her now? "The test," he began, struggling to find air. "It came back." She leaned in, waiting. And? There was a pause so deep it could have swallowed time. "You're not biologically mine," he said finally, the words cutting his throat as they left. "At least that's what the test says." Ellie's smile faltered. She didn't cry. She didn't gasp. She simply stared, as if trying to decipher a puzzle that suddenly had too many missing pieces. "That's not possible," she whispered. "Mom said you were my dad." "I know," Daniel replied, his voice hollow. "I believed her too. But the photo, the letter, she said..." "I know." Ellie stood, backing away slightly, clutching the bracelet tighter. "Then why would she lie?" Daniel shook his head, rising slowly. "Maybe she didn't know. Maybe she thought I was." Ellie's voice cracked. "So what am I supposed to do now? Who do I belong to?" Daniel stepped forward, his heart breaking. "Ellie, I don't care what the test says. You're here. You came to me, and that means something. That means everything." She looked up at him, tears finally brimming in her eyes. "But if I'm not yours, do you still want me?" He didn't hesitate. "Yes. Yes, I do. More than anything." She collapsed into his arms, sobbing quietly against his chest, and he held her like she was his world, because she was, paper or not, DNA or not. She was the child who walked into his life when he had no idea what he was missing. Later that night, after she fell asleep in his bed, Daniel sat at his desk once more, staring at the DNA report, the letter, the photo. Something didn't make sense. Rachel wasn't careless. She hadn't just guessed. He picked up the hospital bracelet again. that date. It wasn't 9 years ago. It was closer to 10. Then the pieces clicked. Rachel had given birth to 2 children, but only one had survived. And maybe, just maybe, Ellie wasn't her child either. Maybe Rachel had been protecting someone else's daughter all along. The next morning dawned with a cold, overcast sky, an eerie contrast to the warmth of the days before. Daniel barely slept. He'd spent the night combing through every scrap of paper Rachel had ever left behind. Faded receipts, postcards, the old envelope from the hospital. Details once overlooked now screamed for attention. It wasn't just the bracelet. It was the dates, the names, the silent gaps in Rachel's story. Ellie woke to find him pacing the living room, a man unraveling something he no longer had control over. "Did I do something wrong?" she asked, standing quietly in the doorway. He turned to her, instantly softening. "No, sweetheart, not at all." "Then why do you look like that?" He crouched before her. "Because I think I'm finally starting to understand what your mum was trying to tell me. And I think she was protecting you from more than I ever realized." Ellie tilted her head. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, then took her hand. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be really honest with me." "Okay. Do you remember anything at all, from when you were really little, before you and your mum lived in that last apartment?" She frowned, thinking hard. "Maybe. I remember a red door, and someone yelling. A man. My mum pulled me away, told me to be quiet." "Do you remember his name?" "No, just that he smelled like beer and made Mom cry." Daniel's stomach twisted. This wasn't about him anymore. This was about what Rachel had fled from, and who Ellie might truly be running from too. He went back to the files, pulled out the investigator's number and made the call. "I need everything you can find on Rachel Lawson from 10 years ago," he said, "including any connections to shelters, hospitals, restraining orders, anything." 2 hours later, the call came back. "There's something," the investigator said. "Rachel lived under a different name for 6 months in upstate New York. She was in a women's shelter with a child. The intake records say the girl's name was Eleanor, but her birth certificate was missing. No legal documents, just a story. Rachel claimed she took the child from a dangerous home situation." Daniel's blood ran cold. "You're saying Ellie isn't her biological daughter either?" "We can't confirm it. But Rachel told the shelter staff she wasn't the birth mother. She said the girl needed to disappear fast." Daniel hung up slowly. Ellie wasn't his daughter, and she hadn't been Rachel's either, but someone somewhere had lost a child, and someone else might be looking for her. He turned to see Ellie sitting quietly on the floor, drawing pictures of a family she had never truly known. Daniel crossed the room and knelt beside her, heart pounding. "We're going to figure this out," he whispered. But even as he said it, a deep fear settled in his chest, because the moment they found out who Ellie really was, they might also find out who she was running from. The following day, the air inside the penthouse felt heavier, tighter, like it knew the walls had just heard a secret too big to contain. Daniel had barely spoken since the call with the investigator. He watched Ellie from across the breakfast table, her tiny frame curled over a bowl of cereal, humming softly as she drew with her free hand. There was a calm in her, an innocence untouched by the storm rising around her, and that terrified him. He couldn't stop thinking about the shelter intake record. Rachel had fled somewhere remote under a different name, claiming she wasn't Ellie's mother. No birth certificate, no legal trail. Only a promise to protect a child who didn't belong to her, but who she clearly loved like her own. And now that child was here, in his home, calling herself his daughter. Daniel turned to the window. The cityscape stretched beyond the glass like a puzzle he no longer had the pieces for. Somewhere out there, a family might be grieving a missing child, or worse, someone dangerous might be looking for her. He picked up the phone and called Naomi Lerner again. "I need you to request records from the shelter in Oswego County," he said. 10 years ago. Name used was Claire Howard. She had a little girl named Eleanor with her." There was silence on the other end, then a cautious reply. You think Ellie isn't Rachel's biological daughter? I know she's not, and I don't know who is, but someone needs to find out before the wrong person does. Naomi's tone turned sharper. Daniel, if this becomes public knowledge, CPS could act faster than we can. They'll see this as an unauthorized guardianship, and Ellie could end up in foster care. I won't let that happen. You may not have a choice unless we find out who she really is and why Rachel took her. Daniel's hands shook slightly as he ended the call. Later that afternoon, he took Ellie to the park. She raced ahead, chasing pigeons and laughing with a freedom that broke him. He sat on a bench, watching her, and wondered how she could carry so much mystery and still smile like that. A woman beside him commented, "She's beautiful. How old is she?" "Almost 10, Daniel replied automatically. "She looks like you," the woman said, smiling. He hesitated. "She's mine in every way that matters." The woman nodded knowingly. That's the only kind that counts. That night, Ellie was brushing her teeth when Daniel heard a sound outside the penthouse door. A knock, firm, deliberate. He opened it cautiously. A man stood there, tall, sharp-featured, wearing a rumpled suit. His eyes were hard, his voice colder. "I'm looking for someone," he said. "A little girl. Her name's Ellie. I think she's been living here." Daniel's heart stopped, because the man held out a photograph. And it was her. Ellie, 2 years younger, standing next to a woman who wasn't Rachel. Daniel's mind went blank for a moment. His grip on the door tightened as he stared at the photo. Ellie looked younger, maybe 6 or 7, her smile timid. But it was unmistakably her. Standing beside a dark-haired woman, different from Rachel, different enough to shatter everything. He looked up at the man, whose eyes hadn't left his face. "Who are you?" Daniel asked, voice low. "My name is Eric Monroe," the man replied, pulling a worn leather badge from his coat pocket. "Private investigator. I was hired by a woman named Lila Foster." Daniel's jaw tightened. "And who is that?" "She's Ellie's biological mother." Daniel didn't move, didn't blink. Every instinct in him screamed, "Protect her." "That's not possible." Eric raised an eyebrow. "You really think that little girl belongs here? Penthouse view? Private school? Press at your door?" Daniel stepped out into the hall, closing the door behind him. "You don't know anything about me." "I know enough," Eric said coolly. "I've been tracking the girl for 2 years. Lila's been looking for her since she vanished. Her ex took off with her during a custody dispute. The trail went cold until recently. A tip came in, said the girl was seen walking into Whitmore Enterprises." Daniel's chest constricted. "You tipped CPS?" Eric didn't deny it. Wasn't hard. Thought if pressure built, the truth might rise. Daniel narrowed his eyes. "Why not go to the police?" "We tried, but the file was closed. Lila's not rich. No lawyers, no leverage. She's just a mother who wants her child back." Daniel clenched his jaw. If Rachel took Ellie to protect her, there must have been a reason. "There was," Eric said. "Lila's ex-husband was abusive, dangerous, but Rachel shouldn't have run. She broke the law, and now the kid is caught in the middle." Daniel's voice dropped. "She's not just the kid. She's my daughter now, whether you like it or not." Eric's expression shifted, softened, barely. "I don't want to hurt her, or you. I just want to make sure she's safe. Let me bring Lila here. Let her talk to Ellie." Daniel took a breath, mind racing. Could he allow that? What would it do to Ellie to meet another woman claiming to be her mother? But what if it was the truth? "I need time," he said. "I need to talk to Ellie." Eric nodded. "You've got 48 hours. After that we go to court, with or without your help." He turned and walked down the hall, leaving Daniel frozen in place. Inside the penthouse, Ellie was brushing Button's ears with a tiny pink comb, her world still intact, for now. Daniel leaned against the closed door, heart pounding. He had 48 hours to decide whether to let Ellie meet the woman who might have given birth to her. And every second was a countdown to a truth that could tear them both apart. Daniel sat on the edge of his bed long after Ellie had gone to sleep, the city lights flickering beyond the windows like anxious stars. The photograph Eric Monroe had given him lay on the nightstand, face up. Ellie, smiling faintly, her hair tied in a loose braid, wearing a pink dress Daniel had never seen. The woman beside her, Lila Foster, had soft eyes, a tired smile, and an arm wrapped tightly around the little girl. It didn't look like a kidnapping photo, it looked like a memory. And now that memory had come knocking on his door, asking for its place back. Daniel turned the photo over. A date was scribbled on the back in fading ink. March 22nd, 2020. Ellie would have been about 7. Right in the middle of the years, Rachel had disappeared off the map. He picked up his phone, thumb hovering over the screen. Then, finally, he called Naomi Lerner again. "I need you to find everything on Lila Foster," he said, his voice heavy. "Custody records, police reports, anything, and I need it fast." Naomi paused. "She's surfaced?" "Her investigator did, and he has proof." Naomi's tone hardened. "Daniel, if she can prove maternity, biological and legal, you may lose custody." "I don't care about paperwork," Daniel snapped. "I care about Ellie. She's finally safe. If this woman shows up and rips her away..." "Then we fight it," Naomi said. "But we need a strategy." The next morning, Daniel took Ellie for breakfast at a quiet diner far from the city center. She loved the pancakes, blueberries in the shape of stars. He watched her eat, her joy pure, untarnished by the storm around them. He envied that. "Ellie," he began gently, "do you remember anyone before your mom?" She frowned. "You mean before Rachel?" "Yes." She stirred her syrup with her fork. "I remember a lady who sang lullabies, not like Mom, softer. She smelled like oranges." Daniel's chest tightened. "Do you remember her name?" Ellie shook her head. "She used to call me Pumpkin. I think I was little." He nodded slowly. "And do you remember a man?" Her body tensed. She stared at her plate. "He yelled a lot," she whispered. "Sometimes he threw things. I tried to hide when his car came back." Daniel reached across the table and placed his hand over hers. "You never have to go back there. You're safe now." She nodded, but didn't look up. "Why are you asking?" Daniel hesitated. "Because someone's come forward. A woman. She says she might be your birth mother." Ellie's face went still. "She has a picture of you together," he continued gently, "from when you were younger." "Is she nice?" "I don't know," Daniel said honestly, "but I won't let anything happen to you. You get to decide what happens next, okay?" Ellie stared at him, eyes wide, searching for cracks in his promise. Then she whispered, "I want to meet her. Just once." Daniel nodded, heart aching, because he knew that even one meeting could change everything. The meeting was arranged for the following afternoon in a private room at Naomi Lerner's office. Neutral ground. No press, no cameras, no one who could twist the moment into something it wasn't. Daniel arrived early with Ellie, her small hand gripping his as they rode the elevator up in silence. She wore a simple blue dress and carried buttons tightly under one arm. Her eyes flicked around nervously, absorbing everything. "Do I have to talk if I don't want to?" she asked quietly. "No," Daniel said firmly. "You don't have to do anything. I'm right here." Naomi met them in the lobby, her usual confidence edged with caution. "They're here, just take it slow." Ellie's fingers squeezed Daniel's tighter as they walked into the room. And then, there she was. Lila Foster stood near the window, dressed in jeans and a sweater that looked like it had seen better days. Her hair was pulled back, her hands fidgeting at her sides. But the moment her eyes landed on Ellie, everything stopped. Her breath caught audibly. She took a small step forward, tears already brimming. "Ellie," she said, voice cracking. "Pumpkin, is that really you?" Ellie didn't move. She studied the woman like she was reading a page she half remembered. "You used to sing to me," she said softly. "The Orange Song." Lila nodded, tears spilling now. "You remember that?" "I think so." Lila's lips trembled. "I looked for you for so long. I never stopped. When your father took you, I tried everything." But then the courts, they... She stopped, glancing at Daniel, pain flickering in her eyes. And then you were gone. Ellie stepped forward slowly. Why did you let him take me? I didn't want to, Lila said, her voice barely more than a whisper. He was stronger. He had the lawyers, the threats. I was going to get you back. I had a plan, but one day you were just gone, vanished. Daniel stayed silent, watching Ellie absorb every word. Rachel took me, Ellie said finally. Lila nodded. I know, I found out later. She worked at the shelter I went to once. She knew what he was. I think she was trying to protect you. She told them I was her daughter. Because she was afraid you'd end up back with him. She wanted to keep you safe. There was a long pause. Then Ellie looked at Daniel. Did you know all of this? Not until recently, he said gently. But I believe her, Ellie. I believe she loved you. Ellie looked back at Lila. Why didn't you come sooner? I didn't know where you were, and when I did, I was scared that you wouldn't remember me, that you'd hate me. Ellie walked slowly to the window, looking out. I don't hate you, she said finally. But I don't know you either. Lila nodded, wiping her tears. That's okay, I can wait. Ellie turned to Daniel again. Can we go home now? His heart caught at the word, home. He nodded. Yeah, sweetheart, let's go. As they left the room, Daniel glanced back. Lila stood still, her arms wrapped around herself, watching her daughter walk away again. But this time she didn't cry. She just whispered, she's safe. That's all that matters. The ride home was silent, the city moving past the windows like a film reel Daniel couldn't focus on. Ellie stared down at her hands, fidgeting with the edge of her sleeve. Buttons sat in her lap, forgotten. Daniel didn't press her. He knew too much was swirling in her small, overburdened mind to put into words just yet. When they arrived at the penthouse, she went straight to her room, closing the door softly behind her. Daniel stood in the hallway, his chest heavy with questions. Had he done the right thing? Had it helped or hurt? Later that evening, she came out and found him in the kitchen, quietly stirring a pot of soup on the stove. Her voice was calm when she spoke. She was nice, not like I thought she'd be. Daniel turned to face her. Yeah? She didn't try to hug me, she didn't cry too much, she just looked at me like she was trying to remember me and not break me at the same time. He nodded, unsure of what to say. I liked that she didn't try too hard, Ellie continued, but I still feel weird, like, if I don't remember her, does that make me a bad daughter? Daniel set down the spoon and walked around the counter, kneeling in front of her. No, Ellie. It makes you someone who's been through too much, too fast. You get to feel however you feel, there's no wrong way. She looked at him for a long time. Will I have to go live with her? The question hit like a knife, but he answered steadily. That's not up to just me or her. It'll depend on what the court decides, but I promise you, I'm not going to stop fighting for you. Not ever. Ellie nodded, then did something she hadn't done in days. She reached for him first. Her arms wrapped around his neck, small but strong, and he held her like she was air itself. That night after she went to bed, Daniel stood by the window, watching lightning flash faintly over the city. The storm was coming. The legal battle would be messy. Lila had rights, but so did Ellie, and her voice, her choice, would matter. Then his phone buzzed again, a message from Naomi. We found something. Call me. Daniel stepped into his study and dialed. Naomi answered immediately, her voice tense. There's a problem. What now? Daniel asked. It's not about Ellie, it's about Lila's ex-husband. His name's not what he said it was. He used aliases. He's been in and out of multiple states. Domestic violence, sealed records, skipped parole. Daniel's pulse quickened. You're saying he's still out there? Yes, and we believe he knows where Ellie is now. Daniel's stomach dropped. I thought Rachel took her to protect her, he whispered. Naomi paused. She did, but it might not have been enough. If this man finds her... Daniel, we need to prepare for what comes next. Outside, thunder cracked. Inside, Daniel realized the real danger wasn't the courtroom. It was the man who might be coming to take Ellie away by force. Rain lashed against the penthouse windows, an erratic percussion that matched the thrum of Daniel's heart. He stood in the darkened study, phone pressed to his ear as Naomi's final words echoed through his mind. He knows where Ellie is. Every instinct screamed at him to act, move her, hide her, shield her from a danger no court could contain. But where do you run when the threat isn't legal, it's personal? He closed the study door quietly and crossed the hallway to Ellie's room. She was fast asleep, curled up with buttons, her chest rising and falling in a peaceful rhythm that made Daniel's eyes sting. How could someone look at this child, this brave, broken, healing child, and want to harm her? He sat in the armchair near her bed and watched over her through the storm. The next morning he took no chances. Security at the building was doubled. Cameras were checked. He installed a panic alarm in Ellie's room and made sure she always had her phone with her, even in the apartment. But more than that, he knew he had to prepare her, not for the court, for reality. Over breakfast, he sat beside her at the table, tension hidden behind a gentle smile. "Ellie, we need to talk about something important." She glanced up from her cereal, sensing the shift in his tone. "Do you remember the man from your dreams?" he asked carefully. "The one who used to yell?" She nodded slowly. "That man, he might be looking for you. He might want to take you back." Her spoon dropped into the bowl with a soft splash. "But I don't want to go." "You won't," Daniel said firmly. "I'll never let that happen. But I need you to tell me everything you remember. Anything, Ellie, no matter how small." She hesitated, fingers playing with the hem of her shirt. "His name wasn't Dad. I called him Mister. He used to get mad when I cried. He locked me in the laundry room sometimes. I could hear him yelling at her, at my mum." Daniel's hands clenched under the table. "Did he ever hurt you?" he asked softly. Ellie shook her head. "Not like hitting, but he scared me, all the time." Daniel nodded, swallowing his rage. "Thank you for telling me. That helps us keep you safe." She looked at him, eyes wide. "Will he come here?" "I don't know," Daniel said honestly. "But if he does, I need you to remember something." "What?" He leaned closer. "You're not alone anymore. You've got me and Naomi and Lila too if you want her. We'll all protect you." Ellie's lips trembled. "Even if I'm not really yours?" Daniel cupped her face gently. "You're mine where it matters. In here." He tapped her chest. "And here." He tapped his own. "Okay?" She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. He pulled her into his arms, holding her like a fortress. But even as he whispered promises into her hair, his phone vibrated on the counter. A new message, no name, just a photo of Ellie, taken from across the street. Daniel froze, the phone cold in his hand as the image stared back at him. A grainy shot of Ellie standing by the cafe window just 2 days ago, a juice box in one hand, her other resting on the table, completely unaware, completely exposed. The timestamp on the photo made his blood run cold. Whoever sent it had been watching them. Closer. Recent. He turned the screen away from Ellie, who was still wiping her tears. "Ellie," he said, keeping his voice steady, "I want you to go to your room for a bit. Lock the door. Take Buttons with you." She blinked. "Why?" "Just to be safe. Can you do that for me?" She nodded slowly, sensing the seriousness in his tone, and left the kitchen silently. As soon as the door clicked shut, Daniel called Naomi. "Someone took a photo of Ellie. They sent it to me. No number, no name." There was a pause on the other end. "He's watching her. We need to move." "Where?" "I'll arrange a safe house somewhere off the grid, but you have to get her out within the next few hours. We can't risk waiting." Daniel hung up and began moving through the apartment with practiced speed. He packed only essentials, clothes, IDs, cash. Then he opened the drawer where he kept his emergency files, among them a second cell phone, unused until now. He activated it and called the private security team he rarely used. "I need extraction. Me and a child. Unmarked vehicle. 30 minutes. They responded with immediate confirmation. Then he went to Ellie's room. She looked up from the bed, hugging buttons tightly. "Is it happening?" she asked. "Yes," he said gently. "We're going somewhere safe for a little while." She didn't ask where. She simply nodded. They left through the service elevator, escorted by 2 plainclothes guards Daniel had trusted for years. Outside, an unmarked black SUV waited. Daniel kept an arm around Ellie as they slid into the back seat and pulled away from the curb. As they drove, Ellie looked out the window, her reflection merging with the city passing by. "Will I have to change my name again?" she asked softly. Daniel looked at her. "Only if you want to. But no one's going to take you. Not if I can help it." She hesitated. "I don't want to run forever." "You won't," he promised. "This is just until we're safe." The car wound through unfamiliar streets until they reached a quiet, gated property on the outskirts of the city. It was a small cottage, nothing like the penthouse, but cozy, hidden, secure. Daniel helped her inside, locking the doors behind them. That night, he sat beside her bed again, reading from one of her favorite books. But halfway through the chapter, she stopped him. "Do you think he remembers me?" she asked. Daniel frowned. "Who?" "The man, the one who used to yell." Daniel's stomach twisted. "I don't know." She looked at the ceiling. "I hope he doesn't. I hope he thinks I disappeared forever." Daniel couldn't answer, because somewhere out there, that man remembered everything. The cottage creaked with old bones, its wooden floors whispering with every step. Outside, the wind rattled the trees like warning bells. Inside, Daniel moved through the dimly lit rooms, checking locks again and again. His phone buzzed softly. Naomi again. "We traced the burner number," she said. "It was activated 2 days ago. Cash purchase, no ID. But we have camera footage from the shop where it was bought." Daniel straightened. "And?" "Tall male, mid-40s, wears a hat low, doesn't speak, walks with a slight limp. Same description Lila gave of her ex." Daniel clenched his jaw. "He's getting closer." "We filed an emergency protective order, but Daniel, he's not going to wait for court, you know that." "I do," Daniel said, "which means I'm not waiting either." The next day, Daniel hired a local surveillance crew to set up temporary cameras around the safe house. Ellie noticed, of course. She noticed everything now. "Are we being hunted?" she asked over breakfast, eyes fixed on the tiny blinking light in the corner of the window. Daniel set down his coffee. "We're being careful." "That's all." Ellie stared at her cereal, pushing the spoon in circles. "He used to say I wasn't real." Daniel's breath caught. "What do you mean?" "When I cried, he'd say, 'Fake tears from a fake little girl.' Like I was pretending. Like I didn't matter." Daniel reached for her hand, warmth rushing into his voice. "You matter, Ellie. You're more real than anyone I know." She didn't answer, but the tightness in her shoulders eased slightly. Later that afternoon, Naomi called again with another update. "Daniel, we found something else. Lila's ex, his real name is Charles Manning, and he wasn't just abusive. He was being investigated for something darker." Daniel's voice dropped. "What kind of darker?" "Child endangerment. There were sealed files, multiple incidents, but no conviction. The case collapsed when the mother and child disappeared. We think Rachel knew." She wasn't just protecting Ellie. She was hiding her from something specific. Daniel felt the blood drain from his face. "What did he do?" "We don't know everything yet. But it's bad. And if he finds her, he won't just take her." That night, Daniel didn't sleep. He sat in the hallway outside Ellie's room, a chair angled toward the front door, a firearm tucked beneath his jacket, not because he wanted it, but because he might need it. At 2:13 a.m., one of the motion sensors outside pinged. Daniel bolted upright, checked the monitor. A figure just at the edge of the woods, watching still. Daniel's heart thundered. He reached for his phone, dialed security, his voice cold and precise. "There's someone outside." "Hold your position," the guard replied. "We're dispatching now." Ellie's door creaked open. She stood there, sleepy-eyed, rubbing one arm. "Is he here?" she asked. Daniel stepped forward and pulled her into his arms. "Not for long," he whispered. But in his chest, the fear was back, because the man watching in the dark wasn't here to negotiate. He was here to take. By sunrise, the figure had vanished, slipping back into the woods without triggering another alarm. But the damage was done. The fragile veil of safety around the cottage had been pierced, and Daniel knew it wouldn't hold much longer. His security team combed the property, finding a single muddy boot print near the back fence. Large, deep, deliberate. Whoever was watching them wanted to be seen. It was a warning. Inside, Ellie paced the living room barefoot, clutching buttons tight. The innocence in her eyes had faded these last few days. In its place was something far older, an awareness no child should wear. "I don't like it here anymore," she said softly. "The walls are too quiet." Daniel knelt beside her. "We're leaving today. Somewhere safer, somewhere new." She didn't ask where. She just nodded. Naomi called shortly after with one last desperate plan. "We found a safe house out of state," she said. "It's through a federal witness protection affiliate. You won't be able to contact anyone, not even me, for at least 72 hours. It's extreme, but it might buy us time to get the injunction finalized." Daniel agreed without hesitation. Whatever it took, whatever cost, Ellie's life mattered more than his empire, more than his name, more than the chaos Rachel had left behind. As they packed, Ellie spoke quietly. "If I disappear again, will you find me?" Daniel stopped folding her sweater and looked at her. "Ellie, if the world ended and the sky cracked open, I'd still find you." She nodded. "Promise?" "With everything I have." Hours later, they were in another car, headed down endless highways, passing nameless towns and gas stations with flickering signs. Ellie slept on his shoulder most of the way, exhaustion pulling her under like a tide. Daniel held her gently, staring out at the road as the weight of everything pressed against his chest. They arrived after midnight. The new location was a secluded farmhouse deep in the countryside, surrounded by fields and trees. No neighbors for miles. No cameras, no electronics beyond a secure satellite phone. Isolation by design. Daniel carried Ellie inside, tucking her into bed before checking the perimeter himself. His security detail, reduced to only 2 trusted men, took shifts through the night. Everything was calm. Still. Too still. At 4:07 a.m., the silence shattered. One of the windows in the kitchen exploded inward. Daniel was up in seconds, grabbing the emergency flashlight and rushing down the hall. "Stay in your room," he shouted to Ellie as she scrambled awake. A figure burst through the smoke and shattered glass, tall, fast, cruel. Daniel lunged, slamming the intruder into the fridge with everything he had. They struggled, fists, knees, elbows, pure survival. A knife glinted in the man's hand, slicing Daniel's shoulder. Blood spilled hot and fast. Security rushed in, tackled the man, and finally, he was subdued. Daniel staggered to Ellie's door, hand pressed to his bleeding shoulder. She opened it slowly. Her eyes fell on his wound, her lips trembling. "He came for me." Daniel dropped to his knees, pain forgotten. "But he didn't get you," he said through ragged breaths. "You stopped him." And for the first time she saw him not as a businessman, not as a stranger, but as a father. Her father, no matter what the past had said. The man's name was confirmed by dawn. Charles Manning. Real identity, real criminal record, real intent to abduct. And now, real charges. Breaking and entering, assault with a deadly weapon, attempted kidnapping. He was dragged out of the farmhouse in cuffs, his eyes bloodshot and locked on Ellie, even as the police shoved him into the back of the cruiser. "Keep her quiet," he spat. "She doesn't know what she saw." Daniel stepped between them, his voice ice. "She knows enough, and she won't ever see you again." Back inside, Ellie sat at the kitchen table, knees pulled to her chest, watching as an EMT tended to Daniel's shoulder. He winced, but didn't complain. She hadn't spoken since the attack, her silence a fragile thread stretching thinner by the minute. Lila arrived hours later, breathless and shaking, having driven through the night after Naomi called her. She ran into the farmhouse, eyes wild until they landed on Ellie. "Oh my God," she gasped, tears pouring freely. "Are you okay?" Ellie looked up slowly, as if unsure whether the moment was real. "He tried to take me," she said softly. "He broke the glass." Lila dropped to her knees and pulled her daughter into her arms, sobbing. "He can't hurt you anymore. He'll never get near you again." Daniel stood nearby, watching the reunion with 1,000 feelings in his chest, relief, exhaustion, and something deeper. Something like letting go. When Ellie finally pulled away, she looked between them. "So what happens now?" Lila took her hand gently. "Now we rest. Now we heal." "But where do I live?" The question hung in the air, heavier than the silence that followed. Lila looked at Daniel, tears still clinging to her lashes. "I'll do whatever's best for her, even if it means not with me." Daniel walked over, kneeling beside them. "You're her mother. That matters. But so does this. Ellie, what do you want?" Ellie looked at them both, her voice quiet but steady. "I want both." Daniel smiled softly. "We can try that." The court moved quickly once the truth surfaced. With Charles behind bars and Lila's history clarified, the judge granted joint guardianship, an unconventional solution, but one that reflected Ellie's unusual truth. They returned to New York weeks later, not to the penthouse. That life no longer fit. Daniel bought a modest brownstone with a backyard and a swing Ellie helped choose. Lila moved into a small place 2 blocks away. Ellie split her time between them. On Mondays and Thursdays, she had dinner with Daniel. On Tuesdays and Fridays, she painted with Lila. Weekends were shared. One afternoon, Daniel came home to find Ellie in the backyard, sketching in the fading sunlight. She looked up as he approached, smiling. "Want to see?" she asked. He nodded. She turned the page. It was a drawing of 3 people, a man in a tie, a woman with a scarf, and a little girl in a blue dress holding both their hands. The caption read, "Family, found, not lost." Daniel knelt beside her, overcome. "You're the bravest person I've ever known," he said. Ellie leaned against him, her voice soft. "You saved me." He wrapped his arm around her. "No," he said. "You saved me." Fall settled over the city like a memory, crisp and golden. The trees lining the brownstone street blazed with amber and crimson, their leaves fluttering down like confetti from some silent celebration. Life had settled into a new rhythm, one not defined by bloodlines or court orders, but by breakfast routines, art class drop-offs, and evening walks shared in quiet laughter. Daniel stood in the kitchen, flipping pancakes while Ellie carefully arranged blueberries into smiley faces. Every Tuesday was funny food day, her idea. He looked down at her, amazed again at how effortlessly she had carved herself into the center of his world. "You think the judge will let us keep the dog?" she asked, referring to the scruffy mutt they'd rescued from a shelter the week before. "I think if you ask with that face," he said, smiling, "she'll say yes before you finish the sentence." Ellie grinned, proud. "I'll name him Radar. Like the ears. Like the way he always finds me." Daniel nodded. "Perfect." Later that day, they walked to school together. Lila met them halfway. Ellie ran ahead to hug her mother tight. Daniel watched the exchange from a short distance. Time had softened everything between him and Lila. There was no resentment left, only shared awe at the strange miracle that had placed this child in both their lives. Lila looked over Ellie's head and said, "You know, sometimes I forget she's not technically yours." Daniel smiled. "Same." At school drop-off, Ellie turned and waved. "Love you both," Daniel waved back. "We love you more." He returned home to a quiet house, coffee in hand, and tried to focus on work. But just as he settled into emails, the phone rang. Naomi. "Daniel," she said, her voice tight, "you need to come down to the courthouse." "Why? What's going on?" "There's been a petition filed. A woman claiming to be Rachel Lawson's biological sister. She's challenging your guardianship. She wants custody of Ellie." Daniel froze. What? She just walked into family court with a lawyer and documentation. Says Rachel raised Ellie illegally. Claims she's next of kin and has legal priority. Judge is reviewing it now. But she's never been in the picture. Naomi's voice was flat. Doesn't matter. If she's telling the truth and can prove relation to Rachel, this could go very differently. Daniel stood slowly, dread pooling in his stomach. What does Ellie know? Nothing yet. I suggest we keep it that way until we know if this is real. He hung up and sat down, shaken. A sister. Rachel had never mentioned one. Not in letters, not in stories, not in the few vulnerable nights they had shared. If this woman existed, why now? Daniel opened the drawer where he kept Rachel's last letter, read it again. Every word, every hint. There was no mention of family. Only Ellie, only him. Then, why was someone coming forward now? He picked up the phone and dialed Naomi again. Do we know her name? There was a pause. She's calling herself Catherine Lawson. And Daniel, her story might be more real than we thought. Daniel arrived at the courthouse an hour later, the weight of the unknown pressing down on him with every step. Naomi met him just inside security, clipboard in hand, eyes sharp behind her glasses. She's in hearing room 6C, she said without preamble. The judge hasn't ruled yet. We argued for a delay until we can verify her claim, but if she's telling the truth... Daniel cut her off. I don't care what blood she shares. That woman has never been in Ellie's life. She doesn't get to walk in now and claim her like a lost piece of luggage. Naomi nodded. I agree, but the court cares about lineage, and this judge is by the book. They pushed through the heavy wooden doors of the hearing room. At the front, a woman sat beside a lawyer in a pale grey suit, mid-30s, dark auburn hair, posture rigid. She didn't look at Daniel when he entered, didn't flinch. The judge, an older woman with a stern expression, addressed the court. This emergency petition was filed under the claim that Ms. Catherine Lawson is the biological sister of the late Rachel Lawson, and thereby next of kin to minor Eleanor Lawson. Ms. Lawson, can you provide the court with your relationship? Catherine stood, her voice calm and rehearsed. Rachel was my older sister. We were separated during childhood when our parents divorced. I was raised in the foster system. We lost touch, but I found her again 5 years ago. She told me about Ellie, said if anything ever happened, she hoped someone would keep Ellie out of the system. Daniel clenched his fists. The lie was smooth. Too smooth. The judge turned to Naomi and Daniel. Mr. Whitmore, Ms. Lerner, do you dispute the claim of relation? Naomi rose. We don't have evidence to confirm or deny it, yet, but we do dispute the timing. Ms. Lawson never attempted contact after Rachel's death, nor during Ellie's legal proceedings. We question her motives and the validity of her claim. Catherine didn't react. After a tense pause, the judge said, until we verify kinship through DNA, I'm placing a temporary hold on travel and major custodial decisions regarding Eleanor Lawson. The minor will remain in her current custody arrangement for now. Gavel struck. Court adjourned. Daniel stormed out into the hallway, Naomi on his heels. She's lying, he snapped. Rachel never mentioned her. Naomi nodded. We'll dig. I've already requested Rachel's birth records, and I'll get a court order for a DNA test. But Daniel, if Catherine is related. She's not, he growled. This is something else. Just then his phone buzzed. A message, no text, just a photo of Catherine Lawson sitting in a coffee shop with Charles Manning, the man who tried to abduct Ellie. Daniel's breath caught. This wasn't about family. It was about finishing what he started. Daniel stared at the photo, his heart slamming against his ribs like a prisoner in a cage. Catherine, poised and elegant in court just moments ago, now sat across from the very man who had tried to tear Ellie from his arms with a knife. They weren't strangers. They were allies. He turned the phone toward Naomi, who went pale as she registered the image. That's him, she whispered. That's Charles Manning. Daniel nodded grimly. So either she's not Rachel's sister, or Rachel's sister is working with the man who abused her niece. Naomi's hands were already dialing. I'm alerting the judge. If this is real, we can petition to revoke her motion immediately. Daniel looked at the timestamp again, 2 days ago. This meeting happened before Catherine filed the emergency custody request. It was premeditated, coordinated. She's not here to protect Ellie, Daniel said. She's here to finish what Charles couldn't. Naomi turned back to him. We need to talk to Lila, and fast. If this goes the way I think it will, we're going to need her testimony to shut this down for good. They left the courthouse in a blur of urgency and adrenaline. On the ride back to the brownstone, Daniel texted Lila and asked her to come over. He didn't want Ellie overhearing this. Not yet. Not until they were sure. Lila arrived 20 minutes later, her hair tied back, worry written across her face. Daniel wasted no time. He showed her the photo, explained the court petition, the lie about the sister, the connection to Charles Manning. Lila's jaw clenched. Rachel never had a sister. She told me once she was an only child. She grew up in and out of group homes after her mother died. If this woman is claiming blood, it's fake, or worse, she's another pawn. Daniel exhaled. She told the court she reconnected with Rachel 5 years ago. Lila shook her head. No way. We were living together then. If someone like that had shown up, Rachel would have told me, especially if it involved Ellie. Naomi, now pacing the room, looked between them. Then we have a bigger problem. If Charles is involved, and Catherine's his inside link, they could have deeper access to Ellie's past than we thought. Birth records, shelter forms, anything. Lila looked up sharply. Do you think it's about money? Daniel hesitated. It might have started that way, but with Charles, it was about control. He lost Ellie once. Now he's using this woman to try to get her legally, clean. The room fell into a grim silence. Then Naomi spoke. We need to prove the connection between Catherine and Charles. If we can show they've been working together, we can expose the fraud and get her petition thrown out permanently. Lila nodded. What do you need from me? Everything you remember. Any records, journals, text from Rachel. Anything that proves she never mentioned this woman. Lila pulled out her phone. I still have the old messages. She sent me voice notes. Some of them were about Ellie. Daniel leaned forward. Please tell me she mentioned her family. Lila scrolled, tapping frantically. Then her face lit up. Here, a voicemail from 6 years ago. She pressed play. Rachel's voice, warm and tired, filled the room. Sometimes I wish Ellie had more family. But it's just me. Always been just me. Daniel closed his eyes. It wasn't just a memory. It was evidence. Proof that the woman in court wasn't Rachel's sister, and maybe, just maybe, the key to ending this nightmare. The next morning, armed with Lila's voicemail and the damning photo, Naomi filed an emergency motion with the court. Daniel accompanied her, the tension in his shoulders now laced with a quiet fury. This wasn't just about Ellie anymore. This was about justice. For Rachel, for Lila, for every day Ellie had lived under someone else's lies. The hearing was expedited. Catherine stood again in the courtroom, poised as ever. But something in her expression shifted when Daniel walked in with Naomi and Lila flanking him. She knew. She felt the walls closing. The judge entered and took her seat. Before we continue, I've received new evidence submitted by counsel for Mr. Whitmore. It includes a dated voicemail from the late Rachel Lawson stating she had no surviving family, as well as a photograph showing Ms. Catherine Lawson in contact with Charles Manning, the man currently under investigation for attempted abduction of the minor. The courtroom shifted, murmurs breaking out among the observers. Catherine's lawyer tried to object, but the judge held up a hand. I've reviewed the metadata. The photograph is recent. Ms. Lawson, do you have an explanation for your relationship with Mr. Manning? Catherine didn't speak. The judge pressed. Are you or are you not in contact with the man who tried to forcibly remove Eleanor Lawson from her home less than 2 weeks ago? Still no answer. The silence was louder than any confession. Very well, the judge said, her voice firm. Based on the evidence submitted, I find Ms. Catherine Lawson's petition to be fraudulent and made in bad faith. Effective immediately, her request for guardianship is denied. Furthermore, the court will investigate her connection to Mr. Manning. She is barred from any contact with the minor and may face charges pending further inquiry. Gavel. Strike. It was over. Outside the courthouse, Lila wept quietly, her hands trembling as she hugged Ellie tighter than she had in weeks. Daniel stood nearby, relief washing over him in heavy, silent waves. Naomi exhaled deeply beside him. "You did it," she said. "No," Daniel replied, eyes locked on Ellie. "We did. She did." That night, back at the brownstone, Daniel and Ellie sat together on the back steps, watching the autumn leaves fall under the porch light. The new dog, Radar, chased a squirrel around the yard, tail wagging, tongue out. Ellie leaned her head on Daniel's shoulder. "Is she really gone now?" she asked. "She is," he said. "The judge made it official." Ellie didn't say anything at first. Then she whispered, "I was scared she'd take me." Daniel wrapped an arm around her. "So was I." "Are we safe now?" He hesitated. "We're safer than we've ever been," she nodded. "Good. I want to stay. Here. With you." Daniel kissed the top of her head. "You're not going anywhere." But just as the calm settled, Daniel's phone buzzed again. An unknown number. A voicemail. He played it, expecting spam. But the voice that spoke chilled him. It wasn't Charles. It wasn't Catherine. It was a woman. "If you're listening to this, I need your help. My name is Claire. I knew Rachel. And I know the truth about Ellie. She's in more danger than you think." The message cut off. Daniel stared at the phone. The nightmare wasn't over. It was evolving. The chill in Daniel's spine deepened as the final syllables of the voicemail echoed in his ears. He played it again, this time with Naomi listening beside him. The voice was strained, urgent, and undeniably real. Claire, a name Daniel had only ever seen once before, buried in a forgotten intake form from a women's shelter. Rachel had used it as an alias nearly a decade ago. Naomi stood slowly, eyes wide. "That's not a prank. That's someone who knows things." Daniel nodded, phone still clenched in his hand. "She said Rachel, and she said Ellie's still in danger. What do we do?" Daniel's voice was steady, too steady. "We find her." By morning, Naomi had pulled every favor she had. Phone records, shelter logs, social media traces. The call had come from a prepaid phone purchased in Jersey City 2 days ago. Surveillance footage from the pharmacy confirmed a woman, mid-30s, hooded jacket, sunglasses, paid cash. No clear ID. But she had left a note on the register when she left. "Tell him the truth lives in the dark." Daniel sat in his office, staring at the phrase. It felt like a riddle Rachel would have written, cryptic, poetic, and terrifying. Later that day, Naomi called again. "Daniel, I think I found her." He grabbed his coat. "Where?" "There's a woman using the name Claire Monroe staying at a rehab facility in Brooklyn. She checked in under a court diversion program. Her real name matches an old friend of Rachel's, Claire Foster." He paused. "Foster?" "Yes, Lila's sister." Daniel's blood froze. He was at the facility within the hour, escorted through grey corridors by a kind nurse who spoke in whispers. Claire was in a small, sunlit room, sitting on her bed with a journal in her lap. Her hair was short and disheveled, her eyes bright but bruised by life. When she saw Daniel, she stood. "I didn't know if you'd come," she said. "I'm here," he replied. "Tell me what you know." Claire motioned for him to sit. "Rachel and I were close once. Before she disappeared, I helped her get out." "Out of what?" "Out of the agreement." Daniel frowned. "What agreement?" Claire took a shaky breath. "When Ellie was born, she wasn't supposed to be kept. Rachel was acting as a surrogate." The words hit him like a hammer. "No." "Yes," Claire said. "It was arranged, private, unofficial. Ellie was meant to be adopted by someone else, someone wealthy, powerful. But Rachel changed her mind. She fell in love with the baby. So she ran. Daniel stood, reeling. Who was the couple? Who was going to take her? Claire hesitated. The woman's name was Vivian Hart. Daniel's heart stopped. He knew that name. Everyone in the city did. Vivian Hart wasn't just rich. She was dangerous. She's been looking for Ellie ever since, Claire whispered. And if she finds out where she is, Daniel's voice came out hollow. She won't stop until she gets her back. The truth, finally revealed, was worse than any of them had imagined. Because Ellie wasn't just a child with a broken past. She was promised. And now, someone powerful wanted what she paid for. Vivian Hart's name hadn't surfaced in Daniel's world for years, not since her quiet but ruthless departure from the public spotlight following a string of sealed lawsuits and whispered scandals. She had once been a media darling, a philanthropist, the face of every elite gala and foundation board. But behind closed doors, Vivian was something else entirely. Obsessed with control, driven by possession, and known to make people disappear when they crossed her. Now, according to Claire, she believed Ellie belonged to her. Daniel sat in his study long past midnight, the city lights barely reaching the walls. In front of him were stacks of papers, old medical records, hospital transcripts, emails recovered by Naomi's team. All pointed to one chilling truth. Rachel had signed a private surrogacy agreement with Vivian Hart. No agency, no oversight, just a desperate woman and a rich one who thought money could buy anything, including a child. But Rachel hadn't followed through. She had taken Ellie, disappeared, and now, 10 years later, that secret had caught up with all of them. Naomi's voice cut through the silence as she stepped into the study. We confirmed it. The hospital staff remember Rachel using an alias. Vivian Hart paid for everything, private wing, prenatal care, birth. Daniel looked up, eyes burning. Was it legal? Technically, no. The agreement wasn't filed with any court. No legal adoption papers were signed. It was all done in cash and confidentiality. Vivian never got custody. Daniel exhaled slowly. Then she has no claim. Naomi hesitated. No legal claim. But Vivian Hart doesn't operate in courts. She operates in shadows. Daniel leaned back, eyes on the ceiling. We just fought off one monster. Now there's a bigger one waiting in the dark. The next morning, he sat Ellie down at the kitchen table, radar curled up at her feet. There's something we need to talk about, he said gently. She tilted her head, sensing the shift in tone. Is it bad? Not bad, just important. He told her everything, in language soft enough to land without breaking her. About Rachel, about the surrogacy, about the woman named Vivian who once thought Ellie would be hers. Ellie didn't cry, she didn't even blink. She bought me, she asked. Daniel shook his head. She tried to, but Rachel didn't let her. Ellie stared at the table. So I wasn't wanted. He reached for her hand. You were wanted more than anything. Rachel gave up everything to keep you, and I... He stopped, voice cracking. I'll give up everything now to protect you. She looked up slowly. Will she come? I think she might. Ellie nodded, brave and steady. Then we won't hide. Daniel smiled sadly. No, sweetheart. We won't. Because this time, he wouldn't run. He would fight. Daniel knew Vivian Hart would not come with lawyers or subpoenas. She would come with silence, power, and influence. She would make calls in the dead of night, and men in tailored suits would appear with smiles and sealed envelopes. She would operate behind the curtain, making people disappear with favors, not threats. And if she wanted Ellie, she would come prepared to erase whatever stood in her way. So Daniel prepared too. Naomi expanded security, added surveillance, doubled the private guards. A new legal team specializing in family protection cases joined the effort. But none of it felt like enough. Because this wasn't just legal anymore. It was personal. It was war. Lila came over that evening. She brought Ellie's favorite strawberry muffins and stayed until the sun dipped low. When Ellie went upstairs to draw, Lila sat beside Daniel on the couch, folding her hands in her lap. "Do you think she'll really try to take her?" "She won't stop until she does," Daniel said. "People like Vivian Hart don't understand losing. They don't understand no." Lila nodded slowly. "Then we don't give her a chance." Daniel looked at her. "You still willing to testify? Tell the court everything you know about Rachel's decision? What she told you? What she feared?" Lila's eyes burned with resolve. "I'll do more than testify. I'll go public, if that's what it takes." Naomi entered the room, a folder in her hand. "There's something you should see," she said, laying it on the table. Daniel opened it and frowned. It was a scanned letter, dated 8 months before Ellie was born. Signed by Vivian Hart. "I, Vivian Evelyn Hart, agree to provide financial support in exchange for custodial rights upon the child's birth." Daniel flipped through the pages, jaw tightening with every line. Vivian's signature, her terms, her rules. But then, near the end, a second letter, Rachel's. "To whom it may concern, I hereby revoke my consent. I do not wish to proceed with the agreement signed under duress. This child will remain with me." Rachel had written it, sent it to an attorney. It was dated the night she disappeared from the hospital. Naomi's voice broke the silence. "We found this in an old law office's storage, buried, probably meant to disappear." Daniel leaned back, breath shallow. "This changes everything." Naomi nodded. "If we can authenticate it in court, we can prove Rachel revoked consent before Ellie was even placed, which means Vivian has no claim." Outside, headlights flashed down the quiet street. Daniel stood instinctively, moving to the window. A black car had stopped outside the brownstone, sleek, polished, silent. A woman stepped out, blonde, impeccably dressed. No guards, no entourage. Vivian Hart. She looked up at the house and smiled. Daniel's blood turned to ice as Vivian Hart's eyes met his through the window, that unnerving smile stretching across her face like a threat dressed in diamonds. She didn't knock. She didn't call. She just stood there, poised like a queen at the gates of her lost kingdom. Daniel moved quickly, grabbing his coat and stepping out onto the porch before she could take another step toward the door. "Vivian," he said, voice low, measured. She looked him over, calm as ever. "Daniel, it's been too long." "I'd say not long enough." Vivian's eyes sparkled with something cold. "You've built a lovely little life here, clean, domestic, almost believable. What do you want?" She tilted her head. "You already know." Daniel crossed his arms. "You're not getting her." Vivian's smile widened just slightly. "We'll see. She's not a contract. She's a child, one that Rachel chose to keep, one that Rachel died to protect." Vivian's gaze flickered. "Rachel broke the agreement. You know that. I paid for everything. I gave her a future and she spat in my face, took what was promised." "Promised," Daniel repeated, venom in his tone. "She wasn't property." Vivian's expression didn't falter. "No, she was a plan, a legacy. And now, she's a scandal waiting to happen." "But I'm not here to fight, not yet." "Then why are you here?" "To warn you." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "You're warning me?" Vivian stepped forward, her voice softer now, more dangerous. "You're playing a game you don't understand. You think courts matter, that truth matters. But I don't need a judge. I have names. I have hands in every office, every agency. If I wanted Ellie tonight, she'd be gone before the ink on your next motion dried." Daniel didn't move. "Then why haven't you?" Vivian's smile returned. "Because I want her to choose me. That's how you win a child. You don't steal her. You shape her." Daniel stared at her, revulsion twisting in his gut. "She knows who you are, and she wants nothing to do with you." Vivian leaned in just enough to make him feel her breath. "Every child wants the truth eventually, and when she does, I'll be waiting." With that, she turned and walked away, her heels silent on the pavement. Daniel stood frozen for a moment, pulse racing. Then he rushed back inside, locking the door behind him. Naomi looked up from the living room, eyes questioning. "She was here," he said. "Vivian. She said she's not coming through the courts." Naomi's face darkened. "Then we go to the press." "No," Daniel said. "We go to Ellie. We tell her everything. We let her decide." Upstairs, Ellie sat at her desk, drawing again. Her small hand moved the pencil slowly, carefully. As Daniel entered, she looked up, sensing the weight in his eyes. "She was here, wasn't she?" she asked quietly. Daniel nodded. Ellie turned back to her drawing. "Then tell me everything." He sat beside her and began. The truth, all of it. They sat together for hours, the world shrinking to just the soft hum of the bedroom lamp and the quiet rasp of Daniel's voice. He told Ellie everything, about Rachel, the agreement with Vivian, the escape, the lies, the danger. He held nothing back. No softened edges, no protective filters. Ellie had earned the truth, and he wouldn't betray her trust by keeping it in pieces. When he was done, she said nothing at first, just stared down at the drawing in her lap. A forest, a girl walking alone, two figures in the trees, watching. "Did she ever love me?" Ellie asked, her voice like cracked porcelain. Daniel paused. "I don't think she ever knew how to love the way you deserve. To her, you were an idea, a dream she wanted to own." Ellie nodded slowly, eyes distant, like a trophy, like a possession. She traced a line on the paper. "Rachel wasn't perfect, but she chose me, even when it was hard, even when it meant hiding forever." Daniel reached over, placing his hand over hers. "And I'll keep choosing you, every single day." She looked up at him. "Even if it means losing everything." "I already gave up everything that didn't matter. All I want is you." There was silence between them for a long moment. Then Ellie whispered, "Then I choose too." Daniel frowned gently. "Choose what?" "To stop hiding," she said. "If Vivian wants me to know who she is, then fine. I'll see her, I'll hear her. But I want her to see me too. The real me, not the one she bought on paper." Daniel's heart clenched. "Are you sure?" "She doesn't scare me anymore." The next day, Naomi called a press conference. They didn't mention Vivian by name. But they told the story: Rachel's escape, Ellie's fight for identity, Daniel's battle for custody. It aired on 3 major networks by that evening. Public sympathy exploded. Hashtags, fundraisers, letters. Parents all over the country rallied in support. By midnight, Daniel's phone rang again. "Vivian," he answered. Her voice was smooth, unshaken. "Very clever. Public opinion. You always were a strategist." "I didn't do it for strategy," Daniel replied. "I did it because you underestimated her. She's not a ghost you can hunt. She's a fire you lit and couldn't contain." "You've made this messy," Vivian said coldly. "But messy doesn't mean over." "Maybe," Daniel said. "But if you take one more step toward her, I will burn every inch of your world down. And this time there will be cameras." Vivian didn't respond. She hung up. Ellie stood in the doorway, watching. "Did she say anything?" Daniel smiled. "Only that she's done underestimating you." Ellie grinned. "Good." She walked in, climbed onto the couch beside him, radar curling up at their feet. And for the first time in weeks, Daniel leaned back and let silence mean something other than fear. It meant peace, even if it wouldn't last forever. It was theirs. Weeks passed. Autumn gave way to the first breath of winter, and the city softened beneath the hush of early snow. The world, once chaotic and burning, had grown quiet, at least on the surface. Vivian Hart disappeared from the public eye again, retreating behind her iron gates and tighter security. There were no more calls, no more threats. But Daniel knew better than to believe she was gone. She was waiting, recalculating. But Ellie wasn't. She was living. She joined a creative arts program after school and began writing her own stories, fantastical tales of girls who turned shadows into wings. She made 2 new friends who came over every Saturday, baking cookies with Lila in the kitchen, while Radar barked at snowflakes through the window. She laughed more, slept better. And on one quiet evening, she looked up from her drawing and said, "I feel like I'm not someone's secret anymore." Daniel smiled, swallowing the knot in his throat. "You never were." One Sunday morning, a letter arrived. No name, no return address, just a heavy envelope sealed with a deep red wax. Inside, a single note. "Let her go, Daniel. You've won this round, but we both know the game never ends. V." He burned it in the fireplace without a word. That night, Ellie called him into her room. She was sitting on the floor, surrounded by old photos, drawings, and pieces of her past she'd been slowly putting together. "I'm making a memory box," she said. "One for the truth, the real truth." Daniel sat beside her, watching as she gently placed Rachel's letter into the box, along with the hospital bracelet, a photo of Lila, and a tiny folded sketch, a self-portrait, her smile wide and free. "Want to add anything?" she asked. Daniel thought for a moment. Then he pulled from his wallet a tiny photo, faded, worn at the edges, the first one she ever drew for him, back when she wasn't sure who he was or what he would be. He placed it in the box. "Let's keep this one," he said, "to remind us how far we've come." She closed the lid gently. "Do you think she'll ever come back?" Daniel didn't lie. "Maybe, but if she does, we'll be ready and not afraid." Ellie nodded. Then, after a pause, she said something that stayed with him long after the lights went out. "I think people always want to know where they come from, but I'm more proud of where I chose to stay." Daniel kissed her forehead. And in that moment, the long war was behind them. Because Ellie wasn't a secret or a possession or a pawn. She was a survivor, a daughter, and finally free.